It's good to be here and talk to you, to continue our series on the radical Jesus. We've been going through the various things, and I'm just going to talk about his radical death, the radical control that he had, because Jesus' death is very near now. And there's various things in the story that show us that actually this was a radical death. Every stage, Jesus knew what was going to happen, and he was always in control. There's a bit of feedback. Is there? It's not you. Sorry, it must be somebody's hearing aid. Sorry. Just coming up there. On Friday, we had a lovely meal at Ed and Maggie's. It was just amazing, with fantastic food that we were still talking about this morning. But it was a gathering of friends, a few are here today, of the 60-somethings. We were all 60-something, and generally the discussion veered towards AI is no good for young people today. AI, we were just expressing our concern. We were being 60-something, it's no good for the children, this sort of thing. And we were generally discussing the ill effects of it. So yesterday I decided to look up what AI had to say about why it was important that Jesus had control over his death. And it said a couple of things. It said, Jesus being in control of his death is important because it signifies his willingness to sacrifice himself for the greater good. And that's true. That's one of the things about him having control over his death. And Jesus being in control over his own death also emphasizes his divine nature and authority, showing that even in the moment of greatest vulnerability, he remained sovereign and in charge. And I thought, yeah, that's okay. That's like it emphasizes. And I just thought, no, this is radical. This is radical. This is something that has never happened before or since, as Stu put so well last week. This is the hinge of the whole of time. This is the hinge on BC and AD. This is the hinge of it all. And when you just read something as well, it takes away the impact, doesn't it? That actually what Jesus went through was not just deeply painful, not just dying for us, but it was actually very, very radical in the impact that it has on you and I. And it's not really a very jolly subject to be talking about on Mother's Day and making all these women feel better. But I just thought, as a nod to Mother's Day, I wanted to just talk my first point, getting away from Matthew 27, which is really where I'm meant to be talking today, and just talk on my first point about the mother heart of God, because Jesus was always in total control of his emotions. And Matthew 23:37 says this, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing." So Jesus is looking out over Jerusalem, a place central to his plan, a place where God chose to settle a people set apart for himself, a place where God chose to make his home, his dwelling place in the temple. This is God's chosen place, and he's looking over it and seeing people who reject him, who have twisted his words and made people's lives a misery through their religiousness. He's looking over the broken. He's looking over unhappy people, and he has compassion on them. He has a deep compassion on them. And it's not just that he's looking over and seeing perhaps the mess that they were making of their lives. He's looking over them And he uses the word prophet here in the present tense. He knows that very soon he will be rejected and abandoned by his chosen people in the cruelest of ways. And yet you can feel the compassion in his words, that compassion that mothers do feel for their children, that compassion, like, as it says, as a hen gathers her chicks. And it's a compassion that many of us see when we see the suffering and the pain in this world. I mean, how often do we shed a tear or cry over the pain we see over the news? And it says in Luke's version of this story, as he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. This is a deep pain. As Jesus talks of gathering the broken, the insecure, the unhappy under his wings and cherishing them and protecting them. This is what he's feeling. And to me, this is a picture that shows the amazing grace and kindness of the Lord towards those he knows are about to cruelly treat him and execute him. And he is in total control of his emotions. He knows what's going to happen. He knows what people are like and their rejection of him. And yet he's in total control of their emotions. And it's just a thought that I thought, you know, for those that have been rejected and badly treated, for those that have really suffered when people have let you down, or maybe those that are filled with dread about what's ahead, Jesus sets an example of how we can be radical. And it's the opposite to how we want to react, isn't it? He has this amazing grace, this amazing strong compassion. It's not a weak compassion that gives a child what they want when they demand, or that fails to tell the truth about behavior. He has just talked to the Pharisees and given these 7 woes, he's addressing these people that have twisted religious things, and he's spoken the truth to them, and it wasn't a nice truth. This is not a weak love. This is a strong compassion that still loves even though they've been rejected and abandoned. And he even loves those that have failed again and again and again. And he even loves when his love is not returned. And that's an amazing love. It's a love that stands for truth. It's a love that doesn't give in to the temptation of self-pity. It's a strength that trusts God for the future, even through a difficult phase. We fostered many children, and one of our foster children was a 7-year-old boy. And when he came to live with us, we said, well, he can come, but we're going away for a few weeks in a few months' time. You need to find some respite care for us. So he went off to his home. We went off to India for a few weeks. And when we got back, there was a letter on the doormat and lots of phone messages, basically saying, you can't have this child back. There are allegations made against you, which we are investigating, and the police are investigating. And it was like, oh, you know, it really hit us hard. It really, and just the emotion of it all. I mean, apart from the fact that the knot in the stomach, that, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And apart from that, and then after we'd got over the shock, the anger that we felt that he would make these false allegations against us. And, you know, the whole process, that whole emotion of it all, it was like massive for us. And after, I can't actually remember how long it was, but it was long enough for it to make us feel really sick and to lose a bit of weight. You'll be pleased to know that there was the allegations were unfounded, and the police had done their investigation, social services had done their investigation. But what I did notice, that suddenly the compassion goes out the window. And love was not quite as strong for this person that had betrayed me, that I'd actually cared for as if they were my own. and to reconnect my feelings, and even with future foster children, to trust them with my sort of vulnerability, I suppose, and love them, knowing that this could happen. It impacts our emotions. Traumas impact us on how compassionate we are and how we treat other people. And Jesus is here, and he knows what's going to happen, but he didn't let the trauma impact his compassion for other people. And he kept going to Jerusalem in obedience and in control. And then the next thing, okay, men, you can start listening now. Jesus remains in total control in his darkest hour. We find Jesus cried out in a loud voice twice as he's dying on the cross. He says, Matthew 27, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And when Jesus cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. This is two signs that show that even though he's facing excruciating death, he is in radical control of himself. He knows exactly what's going on. Just as he was a little bit earlier, Peter had tried to chop off the soldier's ear, and he said, "No, I know what's going on. This has to happen." He says to his disciples earlier when he was in his ministry, "I lay my life down for my sheep." And in the same way, that's what Jesus is doing on the cross here. He's quoting Psalm 22, verse 1, which starts, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And actually, this psalm isn't something that David experienced. Often you can read a psalm, say Psalm 51, and you can say, "Oh yes, that's when this happened in David's life." "Oh yes, that's when this happened in David's life." But you can't see that here. This didn't happen in David's life. Let me just read it to you. My God, why have you forsaken me? I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It has melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Dogs surround me. A pack of villains encircle me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes up among them and cast lots for my garment. From the cross, in this immense pain and suffering, Jesus is still saying, Scripture is being fulfilled today. Those prophecies of the Old Testament are being fulfilled today. And in his second cry, he gives up his spirit. It's not taken from him. He gives it up, just the same as he chose to be born as a human being. He is choosing now to die, and he became obedient to death, even death on the cross. Jesus knew what was happening, and he still knows what's happening today. He still knows the painful situations we face, the unfair situations, the times when the pressures we face just all feel too much. A couple of times I've received in my life some prophetic words with a negative edge, shall we say. Once when we were moving from Warwick to Didcot to Warwick, I think it was our last Sunday at church, the speaker said to me, he just said, it's going to be like me breaking a jar of perfume over Jesus' feet, our time in Warwick. And, you know, there were some positive things he said. But I picked up that phrase and I said to him afterwards, that sounds like we're going to have a hard time. And he said, yeah, I was hoping you'd hear that. Nice. And then actually, a few years later, when we were in Warwick, Jeremy and I were being prayed for by a leader from New Zealand. And he gave us 3 words, all quite similar, but again about negative things that were going to happen. Walls crashing down, Jeremy being hit off a boat, wasn't it? It was just like, this is really hard. And I didn't like it. Anyway, we did go through a very difficult time, a deeply, personally painful time for us. And, it was just difficult. And throughout that time, I looked to those words and said, it's okay. God's here. He's in control. He's told me that it's going to be difficult. And my prayer now has to be, God, can I respond well in this situation? Can I respond well? This is going to be difficult. Please, can I respond well? And that was my prayer. And it wasn't easy. Anyway, that wasn't the point. Sorry, didn't mean to be emotional. This week, David and Lou had both had very similar dreams. And in their dreams, both had a happy ending, but there was a sense of darkness, dark waves, basically dark clouds, dark waves. But it was all right at the end. But when David was telling us about these dreams, my heart sank, because I remembered the pain. And I thought, oh, God. And fear began to creep in. And yet God had helped me last time. God had helped me every step of the way walk through things. But fear had begun to creep in. And life being busy, I didn't process it. Life was just, busy. It was only on Monday. And then, and actually Lou told us her dream on Tuesday. Still fear. And fear. Anyway, on Wednesday morning, I went to the gym, as I do. And whilst I was in the gym, we listened to podcasts in the gym. Whilst I was there, the podcast said, somebody read out a chapter from Genesis, and it says, the reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in two forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. And I just thought, I have got to get on my knees. It's no good going into a difficult situation full of fear. That's not going to help anybody. Okay, this is going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. Whatever it is, I want to respond well. I want to respond in a kingdom way. And I don't need to be fearful. In both dreams, there was a happy ever after, But difficult things do happen in our lives, and God does ask us to walk through some difficult situations. That's very clear throughout the whole Bible. There is persecution throughout the whole Bible. But what God does do is he helps us walk through those situations. He gives us all the grace we need and the strength we need to respond in a kingdom way, to respond in a right way. He gives us all the grace we need for our emotions to stay in control. He is able. But if we approach it with fear, nothing can get into our heads, can it? Because we're so full of fear, It does. On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, my head's doing this. But you settle the issue with God, and it's okay. I can do this. I can walk through this with Jesus. He is going to help me, and he is in control, and that's what he's after. That was my dream. God was in it all. God was in it all. We talked a bit recently about Jesus was God the Father's own and only Son. Jesus was the image of the invisible God. All the qualities of God himself are in Jesus. His deity, his righteousness, his power, they are all in Jesus. He was God. It says in Colossians, for God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, that's Jesus, and through Jesus to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Jesus was a man, but he was not just a man. He was God. And that meant that his death was vastly more significant than the sacrifice of a goat or a lamb, or even the death of an ordinary human being. God was being sacrificed here. His sacrifice had the power of God in it, and therefore it can deal with all the sins of the world. The Old Testament revealed that sacrifices of animals are brought by the people to make atonement for sin. And I just want to clarify here, sin is when we're doing something that is against what God has, as for us, we can look at the Bible and we can see what God says is wrong. And so sin is when we're doing anything that God says is wrong. An atonement is when God removes our sin so that we can be reconciled to him through forgiveness. It's important we know what those words mean. There is a lot of big words when people talk about the crucifixion of Jesus. But this is not a sacrifice that the people were bringing. The people, when they brought a sacrifice, they even had to lay hands on the animal that was to be killed to atone for the sin, and the people then received forgiveness. So it was very much the people making a sacrifice. But this sacrifice of Jesus is different, because Romans 3 tells us God presented him as a sacrifice of atonement through faith in his blood. This is radical because God sacrificed God. And that's the weird thing. This isn't a normal sacrifice. This is God presenting his son, God, to be sacrificed as a sacrifice of atonement. Yes, Judas betrayed Jesus. Yes, the soldiers arrested him. Yes, people brought false evidence against him. Yes, the Roman soldiers nailed him to the cross. But God was in it all. And as God always does, what the enemy meant for evil, God used to bring about this most amazing plan to reconcile his people to him. So Romans 8:28, a lot of Christians know this by heart. And we know that all things work. God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. Now, what that actually means, Mike Beaumont, a theologian, says, is God is weaving good into everything bad that happens. Again, it's not saying God doesn't let bad things happen. It's God is weaving good. And where man, the enemy, meant this for evil, God brought about the biggest good of all, that we can be reconciled to him, have a relationship with him through Jesus. It's amazing. And God is still in control, even when it doesn't look like it. Earlier I read, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This was a cry. This was actually a shriek. They just don't write it like that. It was, I could do it, but I just haven't got it in me. Like a cry of his heart, where it appears that God has abandoned him. It appears at that moment, if you just read it straight off, that Jesus isn't in control. But God hasn't abandoned him. This is the point where sin was laid on Jesus, and the divine wrath of God towards sin is poured out. It's spent, and darkness covered the land. So I haven't got time to go into what all that means at the moment, but what it does mean is that this is an outpouring. The outpouring of God's wrath was the greatest act of love the world has ever seen. This is the greatest act of love. And at that moment, when all that we have ever done wrong and will do wrong is laid on Jesus, at that point, Jesus felt that God wasn't with him, because all the wrath of God was being put on him. All that paid the price for our sin was being put on him. And so he didn't feel his love. He was separated from the love of God. And that point of being separated from God's love is where Jesus is saying, why have you forsaken me? Because more than anything, more than all the pain he was going through, separation from God's love is the greatest painful thing. Most of us have suffered separation from somebody we dearly love. And it impacts us, doesn't it? It's like something in us is really, really sad. When I was 51, my dad died, and I had the privilege of being with him when he died. And actually the whole thing was just actually a wonderful experience in one sense. But when he died, and actually I felt slightly embarrassed afterwards, but when he died, this just cry came from inside me that just said, oh, Dad, oh, Dad. It was just like this cry, and it just came. I hadn't planned. I'm not that sort of a person, but there was like this deep well of pain that my dad had gone forever. And it's nothing. I was 51. Jesus has lived with God for eternity, as it were, his Father. He's lived with his Father for eternity. This is immense pain. This is an immense wrenching, as for that moment he's separated from the love of God as God deals with the sin. This is immense. In Isaiah 53 it says, yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And through it all, the Lord makes his life a guilt offering. A translation of yet it was the Lord's will is, it pleased the Lord. So God was not abandoning him, but God just knew this had to happen, that he had to make his son a guilt offering for us. And so all the time, even when it felt like he was abandoned, God was there, God was in control, and he knew what was going on. However many sinners come to God through Jesus, however serious their sin, the death of Jesus can reverse the consequences of sin. And that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Why? Because it has all the power and perfection of God himself in it. It is not an offering put forward by sinners needing forgiveness. It was an offering put forward by God granting forgiveness. And it had all of God in it. It was God's sacrifice for all time, for all the world. God was in control because he wanted a relationship with us. That was why he died. He wanted a relationship with us. And that's amazing, isn't it? You think of billions and billions and billions of people, and you think of the universe. Who knows? There might be somebody, some other Earth or something. I personally don't believe that, but we just don't know. But he is God of the universe. God of the universe. And he wants a relationship with me. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? That's what he wanted for us. That's what he was after. A relationship with you and I. A relationship with anybody who will come to him and say, I'm sorry because I have done wrong. I want you to be Lord of my life. And however many times we failed, however many times we mess up and do things wrong, he's always there, always available, always saying to us, I am willing to forgive you. Please come. Shall we pray together? Jesus, we don't pretend to fully understand the cross, but we do know, and we are so grateful that you wanted a relationship with us. And I want to say thank you for that, Jesus. And we come to you today with thankful hearts for all that you've done, with thankful hearts that you went to the cross as God and were prepared to be sacrificed by God for each and every one of us. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. We are so grateful. And today we just want to say, we give you our hearts and lives afresh again. We give you our lives where we've messed up, where we've failed, where we haven't trusted you this week. We give you our lives. We choose to trust you, Jesus, because you are in control. Amen.